On this channel, I've spent a fair amount of time analyzing and breaking down the nutrition of the foods we commonly eat. And for the most part, I try to focus on the good, foods that will be a net positive and why. This video is still that, just with a twist. See, I found that there's some foods that get way more attention and praise than they deserve, though this praise is not outright deceptive as it is for some that truly deserve none. I get tired of the superlatives circulating the internet that claim that just because a food has problems, it's complete garbage and should be avoided entirely. These are not that. These are just an unorganized assortment that I think need to be taken down a peg or two in the eyes of the general population. There's no sense in calling something gold when it's just silver, and there's no sense in calling something silver when it's just bronze. So without further ado, these are 10 foods that are overrated but still good. And we'll kick things off with the food that likely made you click on this video in the first place. Supposedly a doctor's nemesis, the apple. If there ever was a food group that is truly hard to go wrong with, it's fruit. And apples are the poster child among them, easily the most popular and iconic. And that seems to have led a lot of people to believe that they are simply the best, better than all the rest. Spoilers, they're not, in literally every relevant way to compare fruit. They have a higher than average sugar content at about 10% by weight, a lower vitamin C content, about 8 grams in an average-sized apple, with most of it located in the skin. They have an average glycemic index, which indicates how much a food raises blood sugar levels, ranging between 30 and 45, and its potassium is often cited, but it's pretty low at about 200 milligrams in an average-sized apple. Now, apples do have a couple of traits that lean in their favor comparatively. Their ORAC value, the measure of total antioxidant power, ranges from about 3,000 to 6,000, with most of it again being contained in the skin. This is higher than many, but still noticeably lower than others, specifically berries. And the apple's fiber content is also solid at about 2.5% by weight, with about 30% of that being soluble. A common selling point of apples is the soluble fiber called pectin, but it's found more in tart and underripe apples, which are less popular and used more for cooking respectively. Now, you're going to hear me say this a lot today, but I'm not telling you not to eat apples. They're accessible, affordable, and almost any fruit is going to be a net positive inclusion. So if they're your fruit of choice, go right ahead. The pectin and antioxidants are good, and it can be a quick energy provider with its sugar. Just as long as everyone's aware that apples are not the premier fruit, and realistically not even close, I'm satisfied. Sometimes it only takes one comparison to make the claim that something is overrated, and I would say that absolutely applies to egg whites. They are chosen over whole eggs for two main reasons: avoidance of saturated fat and dietary cholesterol in fear of the harm many believe they cause, or in order to avoid the extra calories from fat to focus on protein. The former has been addressed so many times by both myself and others, so let's focus on the latter. Egg whites are one of the best, most accessible, and most bioavailable proteins out there, and obviously it's super lean, which can help to reach certain protein goals, which for various reasons can be tough to achieve. That being said, whole egg protein is just as bioavailable and not that much more calorically dense in practice. Assuming both are cooked, whites contain roughly 11 grams of protein per 100 grams, with an impressive near 20 grams per 100 calories. Compare this to the 10 to 14 grams in 100 grams of whole eggs and about 8 to 9 grams per 100 calories. This is noticeably less. Seeing the bigger picture is important though, because that is virtually all egg whites have. With the exception of selenium and vitamin B2, every single other nutrient is in the yolk. Notably, vitamin B12, vitamin A, vitamin D, choline, iron, and the carotenoids lutein and zeaxanthin. All of these you're going to need regardless, and you're going to have to hunt down other foods with them anyway should you choose whites over whole eggs. Add on to that the fact that due to the fat, whole eggs are much more satiating, keeping you from eating excess of other things. Since it's safe to assume that you're eating egg whites for protein, you're watching your caloric intake, and suddenly the trade doesn't feel as necessary. There is a time and place for egg whites, but compared to whole eggs, they're not inherently healthier. And when trying to structure your whole diet, the use cases for them are much more limited than they may first seem. Thus my claim that egg whites are overrated. They say nothing goes better with your eggs than a side of bacon, but bacon isn't exactly the first thing that comes to mind when people think healthy food. Its common alternative, though, turkey bacon, is a different story. So that begs the question, is it actually that much better than standard pork bacon? Well, it is significantly less calorically dense, typically 25 to 40% less, and those numbers are pretty consistent with protein and fat content. Both turkey and pork bacon come with a ton of sodium, and pork bacon actually has less cholesterol for those who feel feel the need to manage that. Micronutritionally, the differences are subtle. Turkey bacon tends to contain more vitamin B2, vitamin B12, iron, and zinc, while pork bacon has more vitamin B1 and selenium. All of this is minor though compared to the main reason people are wary of bacon, the processing. And the turkey variant is often just as processed as the pork one. Both are cured, smoked, preserved, and artificially flavored. Those preservatives are associated with a higher heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and carcinogenic risk, though it should be mentioned that there are versions of both with better preparatory processes. In a direct comparison, turkey bacon is probably better, but not so much so that it deserves to be called the healthy alternative. Both have their problems, but both can also be included in moderation when their shortcomings are accounted for. Sometimes a food gets overrated because we hone in on one specific positive without considering the complete nutrient profile. My example for this is walnuts. An amazing food in its own right, my one critique is of its somewhat deceptive fatty acid profile. Over 70% of walnuts' fat is polyunsaturated, and this includes that one specific positive, the fact that about 15% of walnuts' fat is a type of omega-3. Unfortunately, it's the worst kind, alpha-linoleic acid, which needs to be converted to be used by the human body, and the conversion rate is nothing short of atrocious. Best case scenario, at a 4% ALA to DHA conversion rate, that's 340 milligrams of DHA per 100 grams, which is roughly 640 calories. To compare to an actual omega-3 food, you can get upwards of 1500 milligrams of DHA per 100 grams of salmon, which is roughly 210 calories. By my math, that is over 13 times as much per calorie, and remember that is best case scenario. Considering the recommendation for omega-3s is 250 to 500 milligrams of combined DHA and EPA per day, calling walnuts a viable source is laughable. And it gets even better because the overwhelming majority of the rest of walnuts' fat is linoleic acid, an omega-6. Ideally, you want to keep your omega-3s and omega-6s in your diet in a healthy ratio, as too much omega-6 could contribute to unwanted inflammation. Not only do walnuts not help combat the excessive omega-6 in an average Western diet, they don't even have a very good ratio themselves. And the more time goes by, the more I appreciate the benefits of monounsaturated fat, anti-inflammatory, cholesterol, and insulin sensitivity, just to name a few. And walnuts are very lacking in it compared to literally every single other nut. Macadamia, hazelnut, almond, pecan, cashews, peanuts, and pistachios. Now again, I'm not telling you not to eat walnuts, there's still plenty of merit here. Protein, fiber, iron, magnesium, zinc, B vitamins, polyphenol antioxidants, and gamma tocopherol. And we do need some omega-6 too for protective inflammation and cell membrane structure. But I can confidently say that due to the omega-3 misconception, walnuts are a bit overrated. Some foods get overrated simply by association. Just because the peak of a certain food group is very high, that doesn't mean the rest of it is quite up to par. And to me, nothing exemplifies this better than white fish. Now, seafood gets a good reputation for good reason, but when discussing the benefits of seafood, white fish is never used as an example. Instead, it's always salmon, tuna, small fatty fish like sardines, and various shellfish from crab to clam to octopus. White fish just get lumped in because they are in fact of the sea, but their nutritional merit is comparatively lacking. This list of white fish includes, but is not limited to, catfish, cod, crappie, flounder, haddock, halibut, mahi-mahi, perch, pollock, porgy, sole, and tilapia. Culinarily, they're defined by white flesh, a mild flavor, and a drier, flakier texture. And nutritionally, they're defined by mediocrity. Moderate protein by weight, low fat meaning lower in omega-3s, arguably the main draw of seafood, and they're generally lower in other nutrients you'd expect from fish like the B vitamins, vitamin D, and several minerals. Obviously, there's still plenty of good. Lean protein can always be appreciated. Usually there's some omega-3, almost enough for a day's portion, as well as some vitamin B12, selenium, and phosphorus. A major pro is that they're generally on the lower end with their mercury content as well. But they're really the seafood bare minimum, so don't go choosing cod or tilapia and expecting salmon or tuna. I'm sure many of you have heard the term negative calorie food, and the first thing that seems to pop into most people's minds upon hearing that is celery. Now, let me make one thing clear. Obviously, a true negative calorie food does not exist. What it really means is a food that is so low in calories that you pretty much burn just as much digesting it as it actually provides. And while celery may be the one that takes this concept to the most extreme, it is far from the only low-calorie vegetable or crunchy vegetable-like snack. All of carrots, carrots, cucumber, bell pepper, broccoli, radishes, and more have much more to offer, and at the very least in my opinion, are much more satisfying to eat. Celery is 95% water, which is fine in and of itself, most of these are not far behind. But why not get some nutrients with your veggies? Of the aforementioned, celery is lower in fiber than all but cucumber, it has a lower antioxidant content than 4, a lower vitamin C content than all 5, it's lower in carotenoids than 3, and its vitamin K content is not that impressive. And although celery does have some standout unique compounds, namely apigenin and luteolin, they pale in comparison to the others. Carrots provitamin A carotenoids, peppers non-provitamin A carotenoids, broccoli's glucosinolates, radishes anthocyanins, and cucumbers lignans and triterpenes. I'm not telling you not to eat celery, even as your crunchy vegetable snack of choice, just recognize that it's not the only choice. Celery has garnered a reputation that it really doesn't deserve, as there are many other options that fill its role arguably better and certainly with more interesting flavors. It was about now that I realized that I needed a food that's thought of as bronze that's actually what's one step below bronze? Anyway, it's corn. It is somehow known as a fruit, vegetable, and grain all at once. And while both sweet corn on the cob and dried seeds are overrated, I want to focus on the former today. It's just not that nutritious, especially per calorie, as it's usually eaten as a vegetable side dish or filler. Per 100 grams, it's about 100 calories, with about 3 grams of protein, less than 3 grams of fiber, and pushing 5 grams of sugar. It's got a mild amount of magnesium, potassium, and vitamin C, though it is rich in non-provitamin A carotenoids, lutein, and zeaxanthin. For comparison's sake, it has a lot more calories than most vegetables. Less protein than peas, less fiber than sweet potatoes, less potassium than regular potatoes, and less carotenoids than squash. Simply put, corn has no favorable comparisons. Add on to that the low bioavailability, partially due to a high phytate content. And while it's not necessarily risky, it is objectively worse for blood sugar than most vegetables that fill a similar role. It seems like many people see sweet corn as an equal to other vegetables when in most ways it is subpar, which makes it by definition overrated. That being said, I'm still going to eat it. But if you're looking to add more vegetables or starches to your diet, this is far from a first-rate choice. There are several cases where a base food is great, so many incorrectly assume that anything made from it is just as great. My example for this is oat milk. Usually I have nothing but praise for oats. Oatmeal, oat flour, oat bread, but oat milk is the main exception because nutritionally it is noticeably lacking compared to other plant milks. Now first off, if you can drink real milk from an animal, that should be the first choice, at least in terms of nutrient capacity and bioavailability. But that's a topic for another day. In reality, there are several valid reasons to not drink animal milk, be it lactose intolerance, a milk protein allergy, or just a personal decision not to drink it. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong for that, that's your call. What I am going to tell you is that if your first choice for a plant alternative is oat milk, you're picking a suboptimal option. Ask yourself, what do people drink milk for nutritionally? High quality protein, satisfying fat, and accessible calcium, phosphorus, B vitamins, and potassium. Oat milk gives you absolutely none of that, at least not without some serious fortification. Why deal with that when there are better plant alternatives? Soy milk and pea milk are much more complete and generally more bioavailable. And in practice, even almond milk has more to offer, including the numerous benefits unique to almonds at a fraction of the calories. Now, there's little inherently wrong with oat milk, but the fact that it is commonly seen as an equal to these three means that it is overrated. Drink it if you want, just know that it's even less of a milk than the already non-milks. Another easy one-to-one comparison that leads me to say that one is overrated is couscous. Now, it is somehow still a common misconception that couscous itself is a whole grain. It's not, and it never was. Instead, it's a type of pasta made of semolina flour, which is made of durum wheat. I think couscous is overrated because it's just lesser in every way when compared to two other small, roundish grain choices, amaranth and quinoa. Both are a more nutritious substitute in almost every relevant nutrient, and both are generally more bioavailable too. All three are very similar calorically at about 100 to 120 calories per 100 grams when cooked. Amaranth and quinoa both contain more protein than couscous, and their protein is considered complete. Both are also richer in fiber, calcium, iron, magnesium, potassium, zinc, vitamin B6, folate, and vitamin E. The only micronutrient couscous is significantly more dense in is selenium, which is already abundant in most meats and legumes, so it's not a concern for most people. people. Couscous also contains gluten while amaranth and quinoa do not. So it's edible for less people, but the gluten also gives it a culinary niche. Feel free to eat it if you want, just recognize that there are objectively better options. And last for today might just be the most unanimously agreed upon overrated food, protein bars, or just most protein foods in general. I'm already not the biggest fan of supplements. I find they're largely unnecessary and artificial. And for protein bars and the like, they are usually processed and come with other unwanted ingredients. The protein is often found to be less digestible than the protein in meat, dairy, eggs, and even soy. Assuming it even has a good amount of protein, seeing as there seems to be no official minimum requirement to slap the word protein on the label. There's also all kinds of nutrients and compounds you get in natural foods beyond the one you're trying to supplement, so it should go without saying that you should avoid using these as a meal replacement. Now, I do understand and empathize with the struggle of trying to reach protein goals, and that's why these are in this video, because even if these protein foods are not as good as advertised, they can still absolutely have their place. If they're used more out of convenience or necessity, on the go, or to try to get over a hump to reach your total number. But I would claim that if you're having more than one a day, you're not trying hard enough to get your nutrients from real food. It's also worth mentioning that these protein labeled foods tend to be quite expensive. Now, if you are still planning on including protein bars, make sure you're selective when choosing. Try to avoid as many unnecessary ingredients as possible. Sugars, sugar alcohols, processed oils, and even excessive fiber. Be aware of high-calorie additions like nuts, seeds, and dried fruits. And probably most importantly, make sure that it at least has sufficient enough protein to be worth it. Ultimately, the good and bad of food doesn't have to be so polarizing. It's okay for something to be suboptimal and still a part of your diet, as long as you know how something fits into the overall puzzle and you're aware of how to complete the rest of said puzzle. Now, if you enjoyed this video, or at the very least learned a little something, I encourage you to subscribe as I have plenty more of these on the way. I also encourage you to share it with someone who you think might find it useful or interesting. Go ahead and let me know down in the comments what other topics you think would fit this 10 foods format. And remember that all I ask is that you do your own research and advocate for your body. You only get the one.